At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. I mean, in the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name is the Voice Ogre, and let's begin. For the pirates of the Gorma, the boarding was routine, the plunder was assured, and the automated warning was a joke. Two of those assumptions were fatally incorrect. On the bridge of the freighter Stellar Goose, Captain Gerund's universe was shrinking to the dimensions of a single blinking red icon on his console. Proximity alert. Unauthorized docking contact. For the last hour, the ship had been a haven of tedium. A slow crawl through the empty black between star systems. Now, his stomach was a cold knot. He was a merchant, not a fighter. His ship was a long-haul space truck, its hull plated for micrometeoroids. "Shields?" he asked, his voice thinner than he'd intended. His pilot, a young Forian with delicate limbs and wide, terrified eyes, shook his head. The creature's crest of fine, hair-like filaments was flattened against his skull, a clear sign of extreme distress.
Our emitters are rated for solar radiation, Captain, not for whatever this is.
That was a ship that looked like a fist with engines bolted on. It was ugly, scarred, and bristling with weapon emplacements that looked both aftermarket and overpowered. It had decloaked less than 1,000 kilometers off their bow and was closing with predatory speed. Its transponder was dark. Its comms were silent. "Send a distress call. All channels. Encrypted burst to the patrol fleet. Open channel for everyone else," Joran ordered, his hands slick with sweat on the command chair's arms. He owned this ship. Every bolt, every scuffed deck plate was a testament to 30 years of hauling cargo from one end of the arm to the other. He had one high-value passenger this trip, a quiet ex-military type guarding a sealed container of a geological survey equipment for some corporation. The pay was good, but now he wondered if it was worth it. A low, resonant groan vibrated through the deck plates, the kind of sound of a dying beast. Magnetic clamps, powerful enough to crush a lesser vessel, locked onto their hull with the finality of a tomb door's ceiling. It was followed by the high-pitched shriek of a plasma cutter chewing through the ship's primary docking collar. The Forian pilot watched the thermal imaging display. A circle of cherry-red heat bloomed on the main entry hatch.
"They're cutting to the port airlock, Captain,"
he stammered, a reedy tremble in his voice. Joran, already fumbling with a panic beacon that refused to activate, its ready light stubbornly dark. On the bridge of the pirate vessel Gorma, Captain Jakai watched the same thermal image on his main screen. He lounged in his command throne, a monstrous piece of engineering built to accommodate his massive frame and 4 powerful arms. His 2 lower hands idly cleaned a set of serrated tusks with a long, wicked-looking knife. His upper left hand rested on the throne's arm, while his upper right gestured toward the screen. "Look at them," he rumbled, a sound like a low gravel slide in his chest. "Like a frightened herd animal. Panicked symbols bleeding into the ether. They think a patrol is coming." His first mate, a wiry Ursk named Gru with a perpetually smug sneer, laughed.
"Patrols don't come this far out, Captain. This route is fat and slow, just the way we like it."
"Indeed," Jakai said, a cruel smile spreading across his boar-like face. His brain, evolved to coordinate 4 limbs for separate complex tasks, processed the tactical data from the screen. The readiness reports from his boarding party, and the pleasure of the hunt all at once. This was more than just plunder. It was an art form. The application of overwhelming force was a kind of aesthetic statement. "The cutting is complete. Breaching team, on my mark." The cutting stopped on the Stellar Goose. For a heart-stopping second, there was only the hum of the ship's life support. Then, the entire circular section of the door blew inward, not from an explosion, but from the impact of something with monstrous strength kicking it clean off its molten hinges. The multi-ton slab of metal screamed across the bridge and embedded itself in the far bulkhead with a deafening crump. Framed in the smoking, jagged doorway stood the massive figure of Jakai in scorched armor. He stepped through the breach, his heavy mag boots clanking with predatory confidence. He looked precisely as pleasant as the ship's name suggested. He backhanded the pilot out of the chair with one massive arm, the poor Forian's body sailing across the bridge to crumple against the console with a wet, final sound. Captain Juan stared, frozen, as his life's work was violated in a single brutal second. Jakai's crew, the infamous Blood Scraps, a motley collection of Ursk brutes, poured in behind him. They were a hulking species, all tusks, thick hide, and casual brutality. Their armored forms filling the bridge with the stench of superheated metal and unwashed fur. As Jakai settled his bulk into Joran's chair, which groaned in protest, a calm, automated voice, utterly incongruous with the chaos, echoed through the ship's internal comms. Its tone was that of a pleasant transit announcer. "Dear pirates, a human is on board. For your own safety, turn around now." For a moment, the only sound was the low thrum of life support. The Ursk pirates glanced at each other, their brutish features frozen in confusion. Then, the moment was broken by a wave of deep, guttural laughter. The Ursk pirates guffawed, slapping each other on the back with each of their sets of lower arms while keeping their plasma rifles ready with the upper. Gru, the first mate, sneered, his nasally voice cutting through the mirth.
Human, just one?
He looked around at his armored brethren.
Look, boys, a soft skin. My runt gnaws on things tougher than this.
Jakai grinned, a terrifying sight that revealed rows of serrated teeth. He found the automated warning deeply, personally insulting. "The little meat monkey's pet ship thinks it has a sense of humor. I appreciate that." He gestured with a thick, clawed hand. "Gru, take 5 of your best maggots. Start with the main cargo bay. I want the ship stripped to the bolts. And find me where they keep the liquor. I want to toast the new pet." The pirates' laughter echoed down the corridors as they spread out, confident and cruel. The automated voice fell silent, its message delivered and, apparently, thoroughly ignored. In the cavernous main cargo bay of the Stellar Goose, Sergeant Daniel Cole sat on a crate, the rhythmic clank of distant boots a dull annoyance in the back of his mind. He ignored his sidearm, a standard-issue kinetic pistol that was already checked. He was meticulously, almost reverently, folding the foil wrapper of a protein bar into a perfect tiny square. It was the last of his personal emergency rations, a trio of nutrient-dense bricks he kept on his webbing for situations just like this. He'd eaten the last one yesterday, a futile gesture against the fact the engineers had yet to fix the damn galley replicator. The replicator had chosen to die a slow, sputtering death 3 days ago. The ship's non-perishable stores were locked in the galley, 2 decks up. Cole's official security procedure dictated that in the event of a system-wide malfunction or unscheduled docking, he was to remain at his post in the main cargo bay and secure the ship's primary assets. He was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders, even when they were monumentally stupid. Unfortunately, his stomach was not a soldier. It was a traitorous, whiny organ staging a full-scale rebellion. A hollow, grinding ache gnawed at his gut. A constant, distracting hum that made it hard to think. A faint metallic taste lingered on his tongue, the first sign of his body beginning to consume itself for fuel. His hands, he noted with irritation, had a slight tremor he had to consciously still. The hunger was an old, familiar enemy. It reminded him of the final phase of his selection course. The instructors dropped him on a frozen moon with a knife, a flint, and the clothes on their backs. For 10 days, they hunted scrawny, rock-burrowing creatures and fought each other for the choicest roots. Hunger was a tool the instructors used. It stripped away civility, peeled back the layers of the training, and revealed the core of a person. Some men broke. Some grew vicious and feral. Cole had simply grown quiet. He'd learned to wall off the pain, to treat the gnawing emptiness as a low-grade background noise. He learned that a clear head was a weapon, and hunger was the enemy of clarity. He'd had daydreams for the last 12 hours about a specific MRE beef stew his unit used to get. The kind that was probably 90% salt and chemical thickeners, but tasted like heaven after a 3-day field exercise. He could almost smell it. The rich, savory scent of slow-cooked protein and root vegetables. It was so vivid he had to clench his jaw to stop from drooling. The clanking got louder. It was close now. Multiple sets of heavy boots. Cole finished folding the wrapper, tucking the tiny silver square into a pocket of his fatigues. His expression was flat, revealing no fear, no heroism, only a profound, deep irritation. He just looked hungry. Gru kicked open the door to the main cargo bay with a theatrical flourish, his 5 Ursk cronies fanning out behind him, plasma rifles at the ready. Their bulky forms filled the doorway, casting long, menacing shadows across the stacks of industrial components and shipping containers. They saw him immediately. A single, smallish figure for a biped, sitting in a crate in the middle of the cavernous room. He wore a stained gray jumpsuit, not armor. He seemed unsurprised by their entrance. Gru let out a smug chuff of laughter.
Well, look what we have here, boys,
He bellowed, his voice grating.
I think we found the pet.
Cole looked up, his expression unchanging. He slowly pushed himself to his feet, a long, weary sigh escaping his lips. It was the sound of a man whose day had just gone from bad to worse. A sound of profound disappointment in the universe and everyone in it. "You idiots," he said, his voice quiet but carrying in the echoing space. "You picked the wrong damn day." He took a half-step forward, his hands empty and at his sides. "I haven't eaten, and now you are my problem." The Ursk laughed again, a chorus of deep, rumbling chuckles. They started to advance, spreading out to surround him. They saw a soft, fleshy prize, not a threat. Gru raised his rifle, aiming for a non-lethal shot to the leg. His captain wanted the human's head on a pike, but Gru wanted to have a little fun first. Cole ignored his own holstered pistol. He ignored the rifles pointed at him. His eyes flicked to the wall just to his left, where a high-temperature panel welder hung on his charting station. Its thick, armored power conduit, as thick as his arm, snaked down from the ceiling and coiled on the deck like a dormant serpent. It was a tool for sealing damaged hull plates, capable of melting durasteel. As the first Ursk got within 10 feet, Cole moved with a swift, direct burst of speed that was utterly at odds with his tired posture. Instead of charging or shouting, he lunged sideways, not at the pirates, but at the wall. He ripped the heavy welder from its cradle, his thumb slamming the activation stud before it was even fully in his grip. A brilliant, pencil-themed beam of white-hot energy, accompanied by a vicious hiss, erupted from the nozzle. Gru's taunt died in his throat. Before he could even process the human's movement, Cole had pivoted, swinging the beam in a tight, controlled arc. It lashed directly across Gru's faceplate. There was no dramatic explosion. The Ursk's helmet, visor, designed to deflect plasma bolts, simply ceased to exist. It flash vaporized, melting instantly to the skin and bone beneath. Gru let out a single, horrifying, wet shriek as his world became a sun. Before the pirate could fall, Cole kicked. A powerful, driving front kick landed squarely in Gru's chest, turning the screaming, dying pirate into a living projectile. Gru's 200 kilos of armor and flesh slammed into the two Ursk directly behind him, a flailing, incandescent shield of agony. The other three pirates, momentarily stunned by the sheer speed and brutality of the attack, opened fire. Bolts of green plasma sizzled through the air. Cole tried to advance on them, but the heavy power conduit snagged on a deck strut, pulling taut and yanking him back. A split-second tactical choice. Fight the cable or fight the enemy. There was only one option. The welder clattered to the deck, forgotten. Before it settled, his pistol was in his hand, a fluid extension of his will. He used the tangled mass of Gru's corpse and his two comrades as cover. Pop, pop, pop. 3 shots, each finding its mark. The kinetic rounds were less flashy than plasma, but far more effective against unshielded targets. One pirate's rifle flew from his hands as the bullet shattered his wrist. The other two clutched at their throats, where the high-caliber slugs had punched clean through their thick necks, severing arteries and windpipes. They gurgled, collapsing in heaps. The last conscious pirate, the one with the shattered wrist, stared in disbelief, his good hand fumbling for a sidearm. Cole was already on him, closing the distance in 3 long strides. Instead of reloading, he used the pistol as a bludgeon, slamming the reinforced butt of the grip into the pirate's tusked face once, twice. There was a wet crunch of bone. The Ursk went down and stayed down. The cargo bay fell quiet. The only sound, the hum of life support and the faint, wet sizzling from Gru's molten helmet. Cole stood over the carnage, breathing a little heavily. His stomach gave a loud, painful growl. "Great," he muttered to himself, kicking one of the bodies aside. "Now I really worked up an appetite." On the bridge of the Gorma, which was magnetically clamped to the Stellar Goose's hull, Captain Jakai watched the schematic projected over the main view screen. He saw the life sign icons for Gru and his team converge on the single designated human icon on the main cargo bay. Then, in the space of less than 10 seconds, all 6 of the blood scrap icons went from green to red, then flickered out completely. Jakai leaned forward, his massive fists clenching on the arms of the stolen chair. One of the bridge officers, a nervous-looking specimen named Nivax, stared at the display, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly. "Captain, Gru's team is gone." Jakai remained silent for a moment. Anger could wait. For the moment, he was amused, intrigued. He assumed the human might have a hidden weapon, maybe a jury-rigged trap, a lucky shot. To take out 6 of his best shock troopers, including his first mate. That was more than luck. It was interesting. "The little monkey has claws," Jakai growled, a low rumble in his chest. A predatory grin spread across his face. "This is more interesting than I expected." He jabbed a thick finger at the schematic. "It's still in the cargo bay. Send a full fire team, 10 of them. I want it cornered. I want its head on a pike." He turned his gaze to Nivax. "And find me where they keep the liquor. This victory will require a proper celebration." Nivax nodded quickly, scurrying to relay the orders. Jakai leaned back, steepling his 4 hands. He had lost Gru, but Gru was an idiot, easily replaced. The real prize was the story of how he, Jakai, had boarded a ship that dared to warn him off and personally crushed its so-called guardian. It would be a fine addition to his legend. Cole heard them coming. The coordinated, heavy tread of at least 10 sets of mag boots, echoing from the 2 main corridors leading into the cargo bay. They were being deliberate this time. His stomach twisted into a painful knot. Dizziness washed over him for a second, a fleeting gray out at the edge of his vision. He needed calories, now. Fighting 6 of them was one thing, but 10 disciplined troops, now aware that he was a genuine threat, was another problem entirely, especially in his current state. He holstered his pistol and broke into a steady jog. heading for a smaller service corridor at the far end of the bay. He needed a new location, a bottleneck, something to even the odds. The corridor he chose was narrow, leading past a series of external airlocks used for extravehicular repairs. Perfect. The Ursk fire team thundered into the cargo bay moments later, moving in tight, coordinated groups. They saw the bodies of Gru's team, the scorched deck plates, the discarded panel welder with its impotently coiled cable. Their previous confidence was gone, replaced by a grim caution. The fire team leader, a scarred veteran named Horace, barked orders into his helmet's comm.
Spread out. It went down the aft service corridor. We have it cornered. Move!
They pounded down the hallway after him, a wave of armored muscle and firepower. They saw their target at the far end, fumbling with a control panel next to a heavy airlock door. He looked panicked, trapped. Horace grinned with feral satisfaction. This should be easy. Cole saw them coming. Instead of ducking into the airlock chamber itself, he slipped into a tiny, recessed service alcove set into the walls inside the chamber. A space barely deep enough for one person, filled with diagnostic conduits and smelling faintly of burnt wiring. He pulled the flimsy maintenance panel almost closed, leaving just a crack to see through. The Tanursk, a thundering tide of armor and aggression, charged into the airlock chamber. They were so focused on the empty space ahead, the dead end where their prey should have been, that they stormed right past his hiding spot. Their bulky armor scraped against the walls of the narrow chamber. A sound, a deafening screech of metal on metal. Cole held his breath, feeling the vibration of their passage to the very deck beneath his feet. As the 10th and final Ursk passed his position, Cole exploded from the alcove. He was behind them now. He slammed his palm onto the large, illuminated control panel of the corridor wall right next to the airlock entrance, the one he had been fumbling with earlier. With a heavy pneumatic hiss, the inner airlock door slammed shut, sealing all 10 Ursk inside the chamber. They stopped, confused. They turned, a clumsy, crowded shuffle in the confined space. They saw Cole's calm face through the small, diamond-shaped viewport in the center of the door. He was not panicked at all. He looked bored. Horace, the fire team leader, realized the trap a second too late. He roared and slammed his fists against the door, but it was rated to withstand micrometeorite impacts. It remained shut. The others started shouting, their voices muffled threats of dismemberment and pain. Cole met Horace's furious gaze through the viewport. He raised a single hand and gave them a very deliberate, very human middle finger. Then, he pressed the large, friendly red button on the panel labeled Cycle. There was no sound in the corridor, but through the viewport, Cole saw it all. A hurricane of depressurization erupted inside the chamber. The external door irised open, and the 10 Ursk pirates were violently, instantly ejected into empty space. Their bodies tumbled away into the black, limbs flailing in a silent, macabre ballet. Their screams were lost to the vacuum, unheard by anyone. The cycle completed. The outer door sealed. The inner door slid open with a polite hiss, revealing an empty, sterile chamber. Cole stared out at the rapidly shrinking specks of his former pursuers. He shook his head. "That's a lot of lunch meat wasted," he muttered, his stomach groaning in protest. He turned and started looking for another way up to the galley. On the bridge, Jakai watched in stony silence as 10 more life sign icons vanished from the schematic. They disappeared simultaneously. An entire fire team gone in an instant. The amusement was gone, evaporated. In its place, a cold, heavy fury began to build in his chest. Luck could not explain this. The clever trap felt insufficient. This was extermination. A nearby police officer, one of the few non-Ursk in the crew, a slimy-looking reptilian with shifty eyes, let out a nervous whimper.
"Captain, maybe the warning was..."
He never finished the sentence. Jakai moved with terrifying speed for a creature his size. He grabbed the officer with his two lower hands, lifted him off the deck, and with a sharp, brutal twist of his upper arms, snapped the reptilian's neck. The crack echoed through the silent bridge. Jakai threw the limp body to the floor like a sack of garbage. He scanned the faces of his remaining bridge crew, his eyes burning with rage. He could smell their fear, a thick, greasy stench in the recycled air.
The next maggot who shows fear,
Jakai snarled, his voice a low, dangerous growl,
will die slower. Much slower.
He turned back to the schematic, his mind racing. The human was deliberate, using the ship against them step by step. The human was a predator. He had mistaken it for prey. Very well. He would change the hunting ground.
It is moving through the service corridors.
He barked.
Flush it out. Use the maintenance ducts. Overload the emergency fire suppression systems in that sector. Force it back out into the open. I want it in the main cargo hold where we can surround it and put it down like the vermin it is.
The bridge crew scrambled to obey, their terror of the human now overshadowed by the immediate, lethal certainty of their captain's wrath. For the blood scraps, the mission had changed. This was no longer about plunder. It was about survival. Disobeying Jakai was a death sentence, but facing the human, that was starting to feel like one too. Cole heard it before he felt it. A deep, resonant clang from the ventilation shaft above his head, followed by more clanging from down the corridor. They were in the vents. They were flanking him. Smart. Annoying, but smart. The gnawing in his stomach sharpened into a physical pain. He felt weak, his limbs heavy. Adrenaline had carried him this far, but adrenaline was a finite resource, and his body was running on fumes. He knew he couldn't fight them all in these tight, narrow hallways. Not like this. A coordinated attack from multiple angles would be the end of him. He was a good soldier, not a magician. He had to get back to a wide open space, a place where their numbers wouldn't be as much of an advantage, where he could control the engagement, a place with tools. He made a decision. Hiding was pointless. He had to run. He broke into a sprint, deliberately making his footsteps loud and heavy on the metal deck plates. He made a show of checking over his shoulder as if in panic. He wanted them to follow. He wanted them to think that they had him on the run. He burst out of the service corridors and back into the vast, open expanse of the main cargo hold. He sprinted past the cooling bodies of Gru's team, the air thick with the coppery smell of alien blood and the acrid scent of burnt plasma. He could hear swarming behind him, the guttural shouts of triumph echoing through the ship. They thought they had him. They thought their plan was working. Cole ducked behind a massive stack of containers filled with dense industrial alloys, catching his breath. His vision swam, the bright overhead lights flaring into painful starbursts. He leaned against the cool metal, pressing a hand to his stomach as if to physically hold the hunger at bay.
Come on, you bastards,
he wheezed, more to himself than anyone.
Let's get this over with. I'm missing lunch.
The pirates swarmed into the main cargo hold from 3 different access points, just as Jakai had planned. There were 15 of them this time, a sea of armored muscle and raised plasma rifles. They had him cornered, trapped against a stack of containers.
Nowhere to run, soft skin!
One of them bellowed, his voice amplified by his helmet's external speaker.
The captain wants your skull for a cap!
They heard a strange noise from behind the containers. Not a whimper of fear or a plea for mercy. It was the whine of overworked hydraulics and the roar of a powerful, aging engine sputtering to life. The Ursk exchanged confused glances. They began to move cautiously in on the position. Then, with a deafening crash, their quarry revealed itself. The shape that emerged was not Cole alone. It was a CL-8 mule loading exosuit, a 10-foot-tall, bulky, unarmored piece of industrial machinery. It was essentially a forklift mech, painted in a cheerful safety yellow, now piloted by a very uncheerful human. Cole sat in the open-air cockpit, his hands gripping the controls, a firmly determined look on his face. For a moment, the pirates just stared, and then they started laughing. It was a ridiculous sight, a construction vehicle against a squad of heavily armed shock troopers.
It's playing with toys,
one of them jeered. The laughter died as Cole revved the hydraulics. With a thunderous roar, he charged. The mule was slow and clumsy, but it was also 10 tons of solid steel. Plasma bolts, designed to pierce personal armor, sizzled and sparked against its thick chassis, doing little more than scorching the yellow paint. The impacts felt like pebbles against a battleship. Cole made no attempt to dodge. He aimed the mule's 2 massive 10-foot-long forks like a jousting lance and plowed them straight into the front rank of the pirates. The first Ursk was impaled cleanly through the chest, his armor crumpling like tin foil. He was lifted into the air, still twitching. Cole kept moving. He rammed the fork, with the first pirate still skewered on the end of it through the 2 Ursk standing directly behind him. The sound of tearing metal and snapping bone was sickeningly loud. A horrific 3-in-1 shish kebab. With 3 pirates impaled on one fork, Cole swung the other, which was still free. He scooped up a metal cube container of dense alloys that weighed at least 3 tons. Using the mule's powerful hydraulic arm, he swung the container like a colossal sledgehammer. He brought it down on a cluster of 4 pirates who were trying to backpedal to get a clearer shot. There was no sound of screaming, just a single, wet, final crunch. When Cole lifted the container, all that was left was a crater in the deck, and a slurry of green blood, crushed armor, and what looked like neon paste. The remaining pirates scattered, their discipline breaking in the face of such mechanical, impersonal butchery. They fired wildly, their plasma bolts now aimed at the cockpit, trying to hit the pilot. Cole was already in motion. He dropped the container, charged another group, and used the exosuit's powerful pincer-like clamps to simply pick one up and squeeze. The Ursk's armor screeched in protest before imploding, its occupant reduced to pulp. He threw the mangled result at another pirate, knocking him off his feet, and stomped on him with one of the mule's heavy, multi-ton legs, leaving a perfect, boot-shaped impression on the pirate's torso. This transcended fighting. It was an industrial accident. It was a massacre conducted with all the emotion and finesse of a recycling compactor. Within a minute, it was over. The cargo bay was littered with the crushed, impaled, and pulverized remains of the fire team. The mule exosuit was smoking, its chassis pockmarked with plasma burns, one of its hydraulic arms leaking fluid. Cole powered it down. He climbed out of the cockpit, his legs shaking slightly from the strain. He looked at the absolute devastation he had wrought. He sniffed the air.
Organic jam,
he quipped to the silence, his voice hoarse. Pity I don't have toast. On the bridge of the Gorma, the schematic was a sea of red. But Jakai wasn't looking at the schematic and was watching the main view screen, which was showing a direct camera feed from the helmet of the last pirate to die. He had watched the entire thing. The laughing, the charge of the ridiculous yellow machine, the impalement, the crushing, the absolute deliberate butchery. The laughter on his bridge had died a long time ago. A thick, chilling silence had replaced it. Nivax, the bridge officer, was trembling so hard his scales rattled. He stared at the screen, at the human climbing out of the wrecked machine, and whispered a single, terrified question to the universe.
By the great dark, what is it?
Jakai was a force of nature. It was a monster wearing human skin, a creature that used the tools of labor to commit acts of apocalyptic violence without a flicker of hesitation. The mockery was gone. The amusement was gone. The fury was still there, but now it was laced with something else. something he hadn't felt since he was a frightened piglet in his clan's warrens. A cold, primal sliver of fear, and that made him angrier than anything else. This creature had dared to make him, Captain Jakai of the Blood Scraps, afraid. This was no longer about loot or legend. It was about extermination, and was about pride.
Seal the cargo hold,
He ordered, his voice low and dangerous, each word dripping with venom.
Weld every door on that deck shut. I want it trapped in the guts of this ship.
He turned to his engineering officer.
Give me a schematic of the engine room and the primary systems that run through that sector.
The officer complied, his hands shaking as he brought up the ship's plans. Jakai studied them, his eyes narrowing. He pointed a clawed finger at a thick conduit.
That's the primary coolant line, yes? For the fusion core?
Yes, Captain. Supercooled liquid helium. Runs at near absolute zero.
A cruel, vicious smile spread across Jakai's face.
Good,
He hissed.
If it wants to play with the guts of the ship, we will boil it alive. And if that doesn't work, we will freeze it solid.
Cole knew they were sealing him in. He heard the hiss and spark of plasma welders sealing the main cargo doors from the outside. He was trapped on this deck. Fine by him. Fewer directions for them to come from. He abandoned the damaged mule and slipped into an engine maintenance crawlway. A narrow, greasy tunnel that ran parallel to the main corridor. He needed to keep moving, keep thinking. The hunger was a constant, throbbing drumbeat in his skull now. It made his thoughts feel slow, syrupy. He consulted a schematic on a nearby wall panel, tracing the ship's systems. The galley was 2 decks up. He needed to find a maintenance ladder or service elevator. His eyes landed on a major junction point just ahead of the main corridor outside the crawlway. The primary coolant line for the ship's reactor. A very thick, heavily insulated pipe. An idea, grim and practical, formed in his oxygen-starved brain. They heard them again. Another team. Cautious this time. Their boots were slow, deliberate. They were sweeping the area, room by room. He peered through a grate in the crawlway and saw them enter the corridor. Another 6 of them, moving like soldiers, covering all angles. Cole found what he was looking for in a small maintenance locker, a heavy, meter-long industrial wrench designed for loosening super-dense bolts. It weighed a good 20 kilos. He hefted it, his muscles protesting, and swung the wrench with every ounce of his waning strength. He aimed for the main pressure valve on the coolant pipe, not for the pirates. The wrench connected with a deafening clang of metal on metal. The valve, not designed to take that kind of kinetic impact, sheared off its housing. With a roar that was felt more than heard, the pipe ruptured. Cole was already moving, diving back toward the crawl space he'd just exited. A thick, billowing cloud of cryogenic fog erupted into the corridor, dropping the ambient temperature from a comfortable 22 Celsius to nearly 200 degrees below zero in less than a second. He scrambled through the opening and slammed the metal grate shut just as the worst of the fog hit. The Ursk had no time to scream. The supercooled liquid helium hit them, flash freezing them where they stood. One was raising his rifle. Another was turning in surprise. Their expressions of shock were locked on their faces, their bodies instantly encased in a thick layer of white frost. They became brittle, lifeless statues of alien agony. Cole, protected from the direct blast, was still engulfed in the freezing backwash. An intense, bone-deep cold seeped through the metal grate, and the air in the crawlspace became instantly, painfully frigid. Frost spiderwebbed across his jumpsuit. He grit his teeth, the ache in his bones a new agony to add to the chorus of his protesting body. After a few moments, the emergency systems kicked in, sealing the ruptured pipe. The fog slowly dissipated, revealing the frozen tableau in the corridor. Cole pushed the frosted grate open and cautiously stepped out. He stopped beside the team leader, who was frozen mid-stride. He looked at the perfect statue. Then, he looked at the steel pipe that had fallen from a nearby rack, shaken loose by the rupture. On a grim, morbid impulse, he picked up the pipe, swung it like a bat, and shattered the frozen Ursk from the waist up. The pirate exploded into 1,000 tiny, glittering shards of frozen flesh and armor, not breaking into chunks. Cole looked at the glittering dust settling on the floor. A horribly practical thought crossed his mind. He bent down, picked up a fist-sized, frozen chunk of alien thigh muscle, and slipped it into his pocket. "I might keep these for ice cubes," he muttered, his own breath fogging in the frigid air. The humor was black as the interstellar space outside, a desperate coping mechanism against the biting, all-consuming hunger. The ship fell eerily quiet after that. Cole found a working terminal and did a quick scan of any internal sensors. The pirates had stopped their coordinated sweeps. He counted life signs, only a handful left, 3 to be exact, and they were all clustered in one location, the galley. A surge of raw, predatory anticipation shot through him. They were between him and his destination, the final obstacle. He was bruised, battered, and bleeding from a plasma graze on his arm that had cauterized itself shut. His body screamed in protest with every step. The dull ache of hunger had sharpened into a dizzying, hollow void that threatened to swallow his consciousness whole. But he was close, so close. He began a staggering march toward the galley, using the walls for support. 1 foot in front of the other. Left. Right. A one-man army reduced to a limping, starving ghost, haunting the silent corridors of the ship he was supposed to be protecting. He smelled it before he saw it. The rich, savory, almost impossibly delicious scent of nutrient stew. The overwhelming, euphoric wave of sensation made his mouth water and his knees weak. Someone had left a pot simmering on the galley's thermal stove. It was a miracle. Cole pushed open the galley door. The room was brightly lit, a stark contrast to the dim service corridors, and it was occupied. 2 Ursk pirates stood by the pantry, shoving preserved food bricks and rations into large sacks. They turned at the sound of the door, their eyes widening in surprise as they saw the frost-covered, blood-stained human standing in the doorway. They were fumbling for their weapons, but Cole was already moving, propelled by a primal, food-driven instinct that bypassed all of his pain and exertion. He crossed the room in a heartbeat. He grabbed the first pirate by the back of his thick neck, ignoring the Ursk's roar of surprise, and with a final, desperate surge of strength, shoved his head directly into the large, bubbling pot of stew. The pirate thrashed and screamed, a horrible, muffled sound, as his face boiled in thick, savory broth. The second pirate had his plasma pistol out, but he was too shocked to fire. He just stared in horror. Cole gave him no time to recover. His eyes darted around and found what he was looking for. He reached into a nearby cryocooler, grabbed a frozen, ham-sized nutrient block, and swung it like a club. The frozen block connected with the side of the pirate's head with a sickening, hollow thwump. The Ursk's eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed to the floor, unconscious or dead. Cole neither knew nor cared. He let go of the first pirate, whose thrashing had stopped. Cole pulled the boiled head out of the stew pot. He was about to shove the corpse aside and find a bowl when a deep, guttural voice filled the hallway.
"So, the meat monkey can fight."
Cole turned. Captain Jakai stood there, filling the entire entrance. He was massive, far larger than any of his crew, his armor adorned with the bones of his enemies. He held no rifle. In one of his 4 hands, he held a massive serrated blade that looked more like a tool for dismantling ship hulls than a personal weapon.
"I have killed bigger things than you for sport,"
Jakai growled, taking a heavy step into the galley. Cole looked at the hulking pirate captain. He looked at the bubbling, now slightly contaminated stew. He looked at Jakai. A bloody, tired, utterly feral grin split his face. "Funny," he said, his voice a ragged rasp.
I was thinking the same thing about you.
They charged at the same time. Jakai was a mountain of muscle and rage, his serrated blade whistling through the air. Cole was a blur of desperate motion, weaving and dodging, using his smaller size to his advantage. Jakai swung his blade, and Cole ducked under it, the wind of its passage stirring his hair. He slammed his fists into the captain's midsection, which felt like punching a brick wall. Jakai grunted, more in annoyance than pain, and brought a heavy fist around, catching Cole in the ribs. The human flew backward, crashing into a steel preparation counter. The wind was knocked out of him, and stars exploded behind his eyes. Jakai advanced, his blade held high for a finishing blow.
You are nothing but meat!
Cole rolled off the counter, the captain's blade embedding itself deep into the metal where he had just been. He came up inside Jakai's guard, grabbing a spice container from the rack and flinging a cloud of something peppery and caustic into the captain's face. Jakai roared, shaking his head and blinking furiously. Cole used the opening to drive the heel of his palm up under the pirate's tusked jaw. Jakai's head snapped back, but he was barely fazed. He used his lower arms to grab Cole in a bone-crushing bear hug, lifting him off the floor. Cole's ribs screamed in protest. He could feel his bones groaning, about to snap. He gasped for air, his vision starting to tunnel. This was it. He was going to die in a kitchen, killed by a four-armed pig monster, without ever getting to taste that stew. The thought brought no sadness. It made him incandescently, psychotically angry. With a primal roar, he headbutted Jakai directly in the face. The pirate's head was thick, but his nose was not. There was a wet crunch, and the captain roared in pain, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was all Cole needed. He dropped to the floor, grabbed a heavy magnetic cleaver from a knife block on the counter, and slashed it across the back of Jakai's knee. The pirate bellowed as his legs buckled. He stumbled, and Cole pressed the attack, a whirlwind of desperate, hungry violence. He stabbed and slashed, foregoing a single kill shot in favor of 1,000 cuts, trying to wear the giant down. Jakai swung his massive blade wildly. One slash connected, the serrated edge tearing through muscles in Cole's shoulder. A fresh, blinding wave of pain shot through him. He stumbled back, clutching the wound. And then, the hunger hit him. The dizziness became a complete system failure. A wave of profound, debilitating weakness washed over him. His vision tunneled to a pinpoint. The sounds of the fight faded into a dull roar. His body, pushed far beyond its limits, was finally shutting down. Jakai saw the weakness. He saw the human falter, his eyes glaze over. His bloody face split into a triumphant grin. He lunged, his blade aimed for Cole's heart. But Cole, driven by the maddeningly delicious smell of stew, fought through it. The pain in his shoulder, the fire in his ribs, the dizzying void in his stomach. He grabbed onto it all, using it as an anchor, a focal point. He roared, a sound of pure animalistic willpower, and as Jakai lunged, Cole moved. Blocking the blade was beyond his strength and was too weak. Instead, he used the last of his energy to pivot, letting Jakai's momentum carry the pirate captain past him. He ducked under a wild swing from one of Jakai's other arms and got in close, right up against the pirate's back. Jakai was off balance, overextended. Cole seized the opportunity. He dropped the cleaver, grabbed two of the captain's powerful upper arms, and twisted his entire body, using the pirate's own weight and forward momentum against him. With a final adrenaline-fueled surge, Cole got behind the beast. He locked his good arm around Jakai's thick, corded neck, braced his feet against the back of the pirate's knees, and pulled. He put every ounce of his pain, his rage, and his all-consuming hunger into that single, desperate act. There was a sickening, resonant crack that echoed through the galley. Jakai's massive body went rigid, then limp. Cole held on for a second longer, then let the dead captain slump to the floor. For good measure, he stabbed Jakai's head by his tusks. He grabbed Jakai's head by his tusks and slammed it hard onto the corner of the steel countertop. Silence returned to the galley, broken only by the gentle, cheerful bubbling of the stew. Cole stumbled back, his body screaming. He leaned against the counter, breathing in ragged, painful gasps, clutching his bleeding shoulder. He looked down at the dead pirate captain, a mountain of flesh and useless armor. He looked over at the bubbling stew pot, steam rising from it in a fragrant, heavenly pillar. He hesitated for only a second. He limped over to the knife block, found the largest, sharpest carving knife, and knelt beside Jakai's body. A few minutes later, Sergeant Daniel Cole was sitting at the galley table. He was bruised, bloodied, battered, but for the first time in 3 days, he felt a measure of peace. He had ladled a generous portion of stew into a large bowl. He stirred a new, chunky, dark red ingredient into the broth, watching it swirl with the vegetables. Jakai's brain. He lifted the spoon to his lips, blew on it gently, and took a large, savory mouthful. It was the best thing he had ever tasted. The warmth spread through his empty stomach, a feeling so profoundly good it was almost painful. As he was about to take a second bite, the ship's automated voice, perhaps triggered by the prolonged silence and cessation of violence, echoed one last time through the comms. "Dear pirates, a human is on board. For your own safety, turn around now." Cole slurped loudly from his spoon, the sound echoing in the quiet room. He closed his eyes, savoring the warmth, the salt, the sheer life-giving substance of the meal. "God help me," he muttered to himself, a genuine smile touching his lips for the first time. "Finally. Dinner." The galley door hissed open. Cole didn't even flinch, just slowly raised his head, spoon halfway to his mouth. Captain Giron stood in the doorway, pale and trembling, holding a small, useless-looking maintenance wrench like a club. He stared at the scene before him, the 2 dead Ersk pirates, the massive broken corpse of their captain slumped against the counter, and Sergeant Cole, frost-covered, blood-stained, and bruised, sitting calmly at the table, eating. Joran's eyes flickered from Hurg's body to the contents of Cole's bowl, and a wave of horrified understanding washed over his face.
"By the void,"
Joran stammered, his voice barely a whisper.
"All of them?"
Cole took another deliberate bite before answering. He swallowed, the warmth in his belly a small but powerful victory.
"Most of them,"
he said, his voice a low, tired rasp.
"Some of them took the scenic route out the airlock."
Joran lowered the wrench, the tool suddenly feeling ridiculous in his hands. He looked around the galley, then back at the human.
"The ship's warning. I thought it was a software glitch, a joke."
Cole's tired, bloody face broke into a thin, humorless smile. He gestured vaguely with his spoon.
"Wasn't a joke, Capitan. It's just a professional courtesy."
The alien captain stared, the last vestiges of fear on his face slowly being replaced by something else. A profound, shell-shocked awe. He looked at this one smallish biped, a creature made of soft tissue and fragile bone, who had single-handedly turned his freighter into a graveyard for one of the most feared pirate crews in the sector. Joran finally found his voice, the words full of a weight they had lacked before.
"My ship. You saved my ship."
Cole nodded once, a gesture of finality. He pointed with his spoon toward the simmering pot on the stove.
"There's plenty left,"
he offered, his expression flat.
"So you might just want to stick to the vegetables."
And Captain Joran, owner of the freighter Stellar Goose, learned that the single most important rule of galactic commerce, a rule he would pass down to every new pilot he ever trained. You can threaten a human's life, you can threaten their home, and with enough firepower you might even win, perhaps for the moment. But whatever you do, for your own safety, never, ever get between a hungry human and a hot meal.